Moving along the series, today we have the Portland Trail Blazers. The Blazers were coming off a year where they went 36 and 46 in 2024-25, ended up being 12th in the West, but made a huge push at the end of the year, providing management and fans with lots to look forward to. Their offseason started off with the biggest shock possibly in the basketball world when they drafted Yang Hansen with the number 16 pick. Nobody really saw it coming. There was a lot of better options on the table at the time, and the Blazers actually traded to get Yang Hansen, especially after taking Donovan Clingan the year before. I don't think people really understood why they did what they did, but they ended up doing it. They re-signed Tamani Kamara on an extension. They exercised Ryan Rupert's team option, extended Shaedon Sharpe, and extended the player option on Matisse Thybulle. They brought in Jrue Holiday via trade for Anthony Simons. They brought back Damian Lillard, and as well as they signed Blake Wesley as a free agent. As for losses, they ended up losing DeAndre Ayton, who they bought out, trade away Anthony Simons for Jrue Holiday, as I mentioned earlier, and Jabari Walker walked away as a free agent. No pun intended. There were lots of question marks around their young players and if they could really figure things out alongside the emerging Deni Avdija. But bringing back Damian Lillard showed that the team is looking to gear up and compete right away, so there was hope that these players would figure things out quickly. And now for the season story. The Blazers ended up going 9-16 after the first 25 games, which was a bit of a disappointing start, especially with this team coming in with expectations to compete better than they were after last season's year-end push that they had. The first 12 games were highlighted by the performances of Deni Avdija and Jrue Holiday. Deni was starting his All-Star campaign very early and continued to show what he did in the second half of the season last year. He was filling the stat sheet and playing a point forward role for this team on both sides of the floor. He also continued getting the line at an insane rate. Jrue Holiday looked rejuvenated on this team, as he was getting tons of minutes with Scoot Henderson being out. But honestly, Jrue was also playing like an all-star during this time, and he was providing tremendous impact on both ends of the floor like he always has. I mentioned that it was 12 games because Jrue went down with a long-term injury after those 12 games, and would not return until mid-January. Donovan Clingan also looked great early on. He showed that he spent lots of time in the lab this offseason getting more comfortable with the NBA game and the NBA speed. He was absolutely looking like a future all-defensive big the way that he held the paint down. It's also good to note that he was showing off an ability to space the floor and knock the three ball down, something I wasn't really expecting to see from him, but I think he was sort of doing that in his second year at UConn and then a little bit last year, but he was actually hitting these shots this year at a decent clip at some points. I like the growth that I saw from Donovan Clingan this year. I think he's going to be a really solid player in this league as a big man, and the Portland will definitely try and keep him around for long term. Two guys that kind of started a bit slower but quickly figured things out were Tamani Kamara and Shaedon Sharpe. Both were struggling with their shooting efficiency early on, but it really figured itself out as December came around. Tamani Kamara was still providing that tremendous defensive impact that he always has, that all-defensive caliber impact, so it's not like he was out there doing nothing. As for Shaedon Sharpe, once his shot started dropping, he was really an offensive weapon for this team. He averaged 20 points per game this year. Shaedon Sharpe did the typical Shaedon Sharpe things. He scores from all three levels, getting the hoop aggressively and athletically, pulling up for the mid-range after he breaks down his defender, as well as spacing out, providing catch and shoot and off-the-dribble shot making. He's just an all-around scorer, and I think that's what he's going to be for the rest of his career. An important thing that I do want to note is that in the absence of Jrue Holiday, Caleb Love really stepped up. He was an undrafted guard that came in and took advantage of the high minutes, scoring at elite levels as well as playmaking, finding his teammates at a really great level. Not a super surprising thing after his run in college, but something that I definitely want to talk about. Another thing that I didn't really write down here, but I do want to talk about is Blake Wesley. He was a free agency signing for them this year. He provided great minutes. He was active on both sides of the floor. Didn't play too much, but he did everything that Coach Splitter asked him to do. Definitely one of those team-first energy guys that will find his way in this league if he continues to play that way. Another thing that I don't have written down here, but I should mention, I just kind of briefly mentioned it with Coach Splitter. Coach Billups ended up getting dismissed from the team or suspended or whatever happened there with the gambling ring. And then Thiago Splitter stepped in. That's a whole kind of wild story. I didn't really talk about it when I did the Heat recap with Terry Rozier, but it's involved in the same thing. I don't want to focus on too much. It happened. It's over. Thiago Splitter was the head coach for the remainder of the season. Portland entered the deadline sitting at 23-28, still sitting under 500, but showing in games that they are ready to compete and will be fighting for a playoff spot, which they definitely did the second half of the year. Close to the deadline, they ended up trading for Vit Krejci. The package they sent off wasn't anything of importance, but they brought in Vit Krejci from the Hawks to provide some shooting. I don't remember seeing him a lot on the floor, so I didn't write anything down. It wasn't really of note, but when they did make the trade, they were looking to bring in some shooting because it was definitely an area of need for the team. Portland fought its way to be over 500 by the end of the season, and this was done with the help of Jrue Holiday returning, even though Shaedon Sharpe went down in February and ended up missing an extended period of time with an injury. Another unfortunate injury for Shaedon Sharpe, a long-term one. It seems like every year we kind of hear something about Shaedon Sharpe going down with a long-term injury. I really hope this is something that he can figure out. He's a really good player. It's good to see him on the floor when he can play. So just seeing him go down again was unfortunate. Deni continued to be this team's star for the entirety of the season, but the supporting cast of guys like Clingan, Rob Will, and Kamara were of great help all season long. I didn't mention Jrue or Shaedon because they did go down with injury, so they weren't really around all season long, but they were still there too. Just to talk a little bit more about their big men, Donovan Clingan and Robert Williams. when he was healthy, they proved to be a really solid big man tandem as they brought similar impact to the games on both sides of the floor, very complementary to each other in a way that you kind of replace them during subs and not really notice a negative difference ever. It was kind of just like you'd swap one out for the other person, you get the exact same thing, you can swap them right back out. A very cool tandem they had going on there. It was very clear that Portland was looking to establish a defensive presence with the way they constructed their roster, and I believe it played the biggest factor en route to their 42-40 finish to find themselves in a playoff race for the first time in a few years. They ended up beating Phoenix in their first playing game to lock in that 7th seed this year, where they ended up matching up against the Spurs in round 1. This ended up being a 4-1 loss in that series, but they put up an incredible fight led by Denny and Drew Holiday. I think the biggest thing to note outside those two is the performances from Scoot Henderson. He was looking like a completely different player than what we've seen the last 3 years. I know he struggled with that hamstring injury kind of all year long. I don't actually know when he came back. I don't remember it being talked about. Also don't remember him playing too much. I wasn't really tuned into Portland a ton in the second half of the year because they were kind of one of those teams in the middle of the pack that was, they were fighting for the playoffs. They weren't super extravagant to watch. They kind of played like a slow, methodical, defensive type of game. They don't really shoot a lot because they couldn't really shoot very well. So I wasn't tuned in too much for those games. But I was keeping track with things on the internet and all that stuff. Two guys that I haven't talked about at all, but I do want to talk about. The first one being Yang Hansen. He only appeared in 43 games, but didn't really play enough to garner any real feedback from anybody. It was, for the most part, less than 9 minutes a game, and it was a lot of garbage time stuff. In my opinion, it's still a head-scratching decision by management why they took him at 16 when there were better players available. But I'm sure they have a plan. I'm sure it will work out for them in the long run. The next guy is Jeremy Grant. To me, he kind of seems like the odd man out here in Portland. He's kind of moved to a bench role now, but he hasn't played more than 57 games since his first year in Portland. What was that, 3 or 4 years ago? He's 32 now and consistently in trade talks, so I wouldn't be surprised if they look to move off of him this summer. Speaking of the summer, we will now be looking ahead to the offseason for this team. As everyone knows, they don't have their first round draft pick this year. They lost it in a trade to the Bulls because they made the playoffs, so the Bulls got their pick. So they won't be bringing in any first round talent this year in the draft. The rebuilding phase is over. Winning is now the expectation here in Portland. Their new owner made it clear that Portland's focus is shifting from player development to competing for wins after improving from 21 victories in 23-24 to now 42 this season. He has a reputation of being very aggressive and very cheap, but he may push the front office to pursue win-now moves rather than waiting patiently to continue this rebuild. And that creates a very intriguing storyline for them this offseason. The roster is absolutely positioned to take another step forward. They're returning a strong core led by their all-star Denny Avdia, Drew Holiday, maybe Jeremy Grant, but I don't think he'll be around. He is under contract. And on top of that, they have their young talent, Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe, Tamani Kamara, and Donovan Clingan. But the biggest thing to note is that they expect Damian Lillard to be back next season after recovering from his Achilles injury, giving them another proven star without having to make a major acquisition via trade or free agency. But the biggest question for them is what they do with their coaching decision. Following the indictment of former coach Chauncey Billups, Thiago Splitter took over and guided Portland to a strong finish, earning himself serious consideration for the permanent job. It was noted that the owner is trying to pay the coaches a little bit less than league average, which may scare some away, so it's very uncertain who ends up claiming this position. However, it is to note that Splitter has built strong support inside the organization. The Blazers finished the regular season going 13-8 and ranked first in defensive rating over the final stretch, as I mentioned before, this defensive identity. Players have publicly come out and praised Splitter's leadership and ability to get the best out of them. And I think it's because of this that recently it came out that Splitter is still definitely in the mix for the coaching job. So I think it's just a matter of how much the owner wants to pay this coach. Going into free agency, Portland has financial flexibility despite their recent extensions. These extensions include guys like Shaedon Sharpe and Tamani Kamara, where they increase the payroll of the team, but the Blazers still sit comfortably below the luxury tax and the first apron, giving them room to re-sign key players or even pursue outside additions. It doesn't need to be a major splash just because of the fact that Damian Lillard is returning next year. They're kind of already getting an all-NBA player without having to buy one or trade for one this offseason. So they could go out and get those depth pieces. I think the biggest thing they want to add is shooting, probably at every single position. That was their biggest area of need last year. So I definitely think they're going to be going after some of those shooting and defending options that will be available. Another free agent decision is Robert Williams. He played an important role during the playoffs as well as the regular season and remains a highly effective defensive big when he's healthy. Keyword, when he's healthy. The challenge is balancing his impact with the lengthy injury history that makes any long-term deal a bit risky. I think they try and keep him around. He's a little bit younger, but I mean, he's also been linked to being in trades or being signed to other teams this offseason. So his future is definitely uncertain here in Portland. That could be why they drafted Yang Hansen, because they weren't sure what they were going to do with Robert Williams. They might be hoping he's going to be taking a leap this year. I mean, he looked really good in the G League. He even made the G League All-Star team that played in the Rising Stars Challenge. So maybe losing Robert Williams isn't going to be a big thing for them. Maybe they're kind of expecting Yang to be able to come in and to play some backup minutes next year at the big. There's two big extension eligible players for the Portland this offseason. First one being Scoot Henderson. Despite missing most of the regular season with that hamstring injury that I mentioned, He played some of his best basketball of his career in the first round of the playoffs, and he looks like a major part of Portland's future. An extension might not be in his future this offseason, but I think what they might do is sort of let it play out as the season progresses and try and get him locked down before the end of the season maybe, because if they don't, I think he enters restricted free agency next offseason. And based on what we saw in the playoffs, he's definitely shown some promise to be a guard of the future beside Dame. Who knows how long Drew Holiday's here, but he has a skill set to play off ball as a 2 guard. He's a little bit smaller, but I fully expect them to commit to their former number 2 overall pick. The next guy is Denny. He's extension eligible this offseason, but he's not expected to sign one just yet because his $13.1 million salary next season is below the player average salary. So the maximum Portland can extend him for right now is 3 years, $67.1 million. So I think it'll be something that's kind of delayed on his end. The Trailblazers enter the offseason with a talented young core, financial flexibility, and an ownership group eager to start winning now, especially with a strong returning core of players next year and Damian Lillard being back. But decisions on their head coach, prioritizing the right extension candidates, and finding the right pieces to help out their struggling outside shooting will determine whether the Portland Trailblazers can take that next step towards title contention anytime soon.